Hi, it's Michael Kerr here, presenting Small Business Banter. A healthy micro and small business sector means a successful economy and a more vibrant society. Small Business Banter is about helping regional business owners better prepare for current challenges, but also for the next stage of business success. I'm Michael Kerr, founder of Kerr Capital, advisors to business owners. Each week, I interview a fellow small business owner or an expert, and they share their stories, their lived experiences, the wins and the losses, and their best advice to help you, the listener, get the most you can from your own business. Small Business Banter is brought to you from the studios of 104.7 Gippsland FM and is heard across Australia on the Community Radio Network. And thanks also to Kerr Capital, supporters of the show. Today we're going straight to the first part of my two-part discussion with Russell Spokes, who with his wife exited, in inverted commas, the incredibly popular Maggie's Kitchen in Queenscliff, Victoria. They did that by closing the business down rather than selling it. They chose to do that. This is the third interview in the Small Business Banter Summer Series that has been put together for the benefit of current regional owners and the communities that are so dependent on the long-term survival of those local small businesses. Listen in to hear Russell talk openly about what led him and his wife to happily choose the option they did. I came across Russell. He'd run a business called Maggies Kitchen in Queenscliff in Victoria with his wife. I saw an article in the paper. They decided to close the business down after something like 25 odd years. And I was intrigued. I wanted to understand why you wouldn't sell a business like that. And anyway, Russell, in the next 45 minutes or so, gives us an incredible insight to his philosophy on businesses. He talks about his three businesses, the experience he had going broke, starting again. It's a wonderful chat with someone who was very, and with his wife, very conscious about this last business and how they were going to get out. They got out on their terms by closing the business down. Can't help but wonder what could have been. It was the kind of business that had some pretty raving fans for their sauces and preserves, but it's a terrific insight and a very honest and open one. So listen in to Russell. Really pleased to welcome in Russell Spokes, who's one half of the team that founded and have recently exited. And we're going to talk more about their exit. The business was Maggie's Kitchen in Queenscliff. It was a very well supported local business, and it's really great to have Russell in. Welcome in, Russell.
Thanks, Mark.
I connected with you when I saw a story recently I think it was in the ABC, about the fact that you'd chosen to close down your business.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah, and so I really want to dig down on what that, what you went through in terms of making that decision to exit on your own terms. But
Yep.
If we could go back and just for those listening in, talk a little bit about, I think Maggie's Kitchen was your second business, but could you just talk us through your first business and then how you got started in Maggie's Kitchen and what Maggie's Kitchen was as an institution in Queenscliff?
Yeah. Well, I guess actually it was our third business. I was a public servant for about 17 years, and I grew up in country Victoria. My parents had two general stores, so I grew up in small business in general store, and I guess that's where it come from. And then I went to Melbourne and worked in the public service and got married, had three children, and eventually we decided that we would buy ourselves a small business. And the first small business we bought was actually in Queenscliff, next door to where we ended up being. And that was a fish and chip shop, which we did for a couple of years, and it was reasonably successful, but we had very young children, so it was so demanding. that we found that quite difficult. So we
that
sold
was a lot of evening hours work,
Yes,
which
that's right. And also when school holidays hit, we were very busy, and we had 3 young kids, and so it was very difficult. So we ended up selling that after a couple of years, and then we bought a fruit shop, and there was our first mistake, because we looked for a business that would give us less hours.
that was also in Queenscliff, Russell?
No, this was in Geelong,
Oh,
in
okay.
Geelong West, and we bought this business probably without doing enough due diligence. The business worked quite well for 6 or 8 months, and then around the corner, or not very far away, a big fruit farm opened up, which we were totally unaware of was going to happen, but the previous owners obviously knew that.
Right, so that's when you're saying you didn't do your due diligence.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, so
you
that
didn't
was
ask the right questions.
no, and that was a hard learning curve, but that's what certainly we learned the hard way, which I would sort of say, if anyone asked me now, that would be the first thing I would tell them to do. Anyway, after a couple of years, we were in all sorts of strife. The business went backwards. We couldn't compete. And so to help things along, Maggie, my wife, used to make some bit of relish, a bit of jam from the fruit from the shop, and we were selling it in the shop, and it started to sell quite well. Anyway, eventually we had to get out of the fruit shop, and we virtually give it away just to get out of it in the finish.
Right. It's a rich but expensive learning.
Yes. And so through that process, we lost everything. We virtually didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. When we first bought our first business, we had a house. We sold the house. We used the capital to buy the businesses. So we didn't have a house or a property that we owned. But by the time we got out of the fruit shop, I think we had about $3,000 to our name. So we had three children at school, and So
were you still living in? So you were
in Geelong West,
right? And you lived in Geelong West while you ran the Queenscliff business?
No. When we had the shop in Queenscliff, the first shop in Queenscliff, we lived above we lived on the premises. So
okay, yep.
So we were renting a premises in Geelong West, and so when we got out of the fruit shop, before we actually got out of it, we had this idea that was born through Maggie making some preserves and selling them in the fruit shop. So we thought, well, we'll get out of the fruit shop and we'll see what we can do. So the idea then was to go back to Queenscliff, where we knew there was a bacon shop, very small shop, and set up a little small commercial kitchen. And so Mark was going to make preserves and I was going to go and get a job, and which duly happened. Mark was making a few preserves. We put a few sweets, lollies, that sort of thing into it, some chocolates. And I went and worked at the View Grand as a waiter, which was an interesting experience for about 18 months.
Whilst the business got up and running. But it must have taken a lot of courage to go into a third business, Russell, after the experience of the second.
Well, I guess so, but back then we never really thought of anything else. I mean, we come out of the fruit shop without anything behind us, and it wasn't that easy to get a job. And because the few preserves Mark made in the shop is where the idea was born, so we did that. And for about 18 months, I worked at the View Grand, and Mark worked in the shop, and we eventually I started to do the cooking, and we started to put more and more stuff into the shop. And I remember the first Christmas that we were there, we made up a few small baskets, and they sold really well. So eventually, after 18 months or so, I was doing all the cooking and working full time 7 days a week in the shop, and it was going okay. We weren't making a lot of money, but we were keeping our head above water. And then after about 3 years, we decided that the place just wasn't big enough. It was tiny. And our then landlords also owned another premises up in the main street, and it was vacant at the time. And so we moved up there, which meant our rent doubled. But another lesson learned here, position is everything.
Yeah.
We moved up into the main street, and we couldn't believe the number of people that come into the shop and said we didn't even know that we were in town. And we'd been there for 3 years around the corner, but people said they didn't even know we were there.
So that was another gamble, if you like, but it sounded like you firstly were pretty confident in Maggie's secret, recipes and for preserves and sauces, but then to move around the corner in the main street. But I think in the article I read about you, your calling card wasn't really so much marketing, but more the odours from cooking, not leaching, but blowing out into Hesse Street in Queenscliff, which is in Victoria,
right.
For those that are listening and not quite sure. I should have explained that earlier, but it's a charming seaside place near where I live. And so you took another leap of faith. By that time, I'm gathering you were both working in the business pretty much full time?
Yes, by that stage certainly were. So it certainly grew, and from when we moved around in the main street, it grew very rapidly. We got very busy, but we kept it at a level where we didn't try to expand. We kept it so just Marg and I worked in it. We didn't want to get that big, but sometimes then you lose sight of what you're doing. So we were quite content for just the two of us to run it.
Right. So you had at level of view as a couple, you had a clear view that it wasn't going to be a massive business, a franchise. You had an idea of what it needed to do for you, what it needed to make for you to make it a successful venture.
Yeah, we worked along those lines, and I guess also because Queenscliff, for those again who don't know, it's very seasonal. Yeah, winters are very quiet, summers are extremely busy. So there's good and bad to that. Whereas you don't get all year round even trade. You're either busy or you're quiet. But at least while you're quiet, you got a bit of a rest. You got some respite from it. You worked less hours. And so we sort of kept it like that. But a few years down the track, I don't know, it might have been, we found Christmas is very busy. We started, again, Marg, making Christmas baskets, and that was huge. Every year until we finished it, it was massive. We would probably make anything up to 700 or 800 baskets every Christmas. So it was a massive amount of work. But we did at times through the years think of opening another shop around the coast somewhere. But we always sort of felt that if we did that, we were spreading ourselves too thin and perhaps not concentrating on the one business that was being successful and trying to get too big and then it gets out of hand.
Well, it's a really good question to ask as a business owner. Why, in the first place, why am I in this, or why are we in this? And there's every temptation to grow, and a lot of popular business philosophy is to grow, and it's all systemize and put in another piece of plant and equipment. But I really genuinely love that you were challenged with opportunities to grow, but you had a fairly clear vision by the sounds, or not even a vision, just a clear idea of what the business was doing for you, what it needed to be.
I think, Mike, what also happened with us was the fact that we'd had an unsuccessful business and that we we virtually went broke,
Yeah.
is that we suddenly had this business that was doing well for us. We were getting back onto our feet. And so we sort of never lost sight of that fact that let's not get greedy here. This is doing what we hoped it would do. It's got us back on our feet. We're doing okay, and perhaps that's a bit of lack of not being ambitious enough. But having already seen one side of the coin, we really didn't want to go back there again.
Yeah, well, it's I guess that going through what you went through with the second business, and that's certainly an eye opener. But it's it would be it would sit on you. You're never going to forget something like that, and
no,
and you have to. I guess you have to draw on the learnings and the positives, if you like, as hard as it may have been, to what all you can do is look forward and use that experience in a way. And you clearly did that. So
I think that perhaps we were a bit scared to try and expand too much for fear of losing it all again. Right. And I sometimes think, if you've got something that's successful and it's doing what you want it to do and you're doing okay out of it, sometimes it's all right to be satisfied with that.
Absolutely. I think it's actually really brave to resist as well, because it's,
I don't know about that, but you sort of got to look at it, and you've got to look at the pros and cons and what it's going to do to your lifestyle, for one. How much more time it's going to take up within your business. So you've sort of got to weigh a lot of things up, I think.
You sure do. But again, to make the point, I think you had a balance of the business was we'll talk about working in a business with your wife but you must have had a good discipline about why you were in business and what it was there for. And so let's get to talk. So you've had 27 years in Maggie's Kitchen. That's a heritage business.
It's a long time.
Well, I moved to the area 18 months ago, and it's as I said, a charming place, and one of the I did walk down there from time to time and go, there's the visual, but then there's the what you pick up through through
the aroma,
and it was distinctive. So can you talk about life in business with your wife and over a 27-year period, and how you divvied up things and how you managed?
I think that we sort of learned early on who did what, where, and when. I think it was we sort of didn't have defined roles, but in one sense we did. Like, I did all the cooking. Maggie did all the rest of it. In so much as that she would do all the purchasing for. We sold a lot of kitchen knickknacks, and that sort of evolved over time. And then we sort of had a lot of confectionery and chocolates, which we would buy in bulk, which all needed weighing up, bagging, and all that sort of thing. So Maggie tended to do all that side of it. I tended to do all the cooking, and I went to the wholesale market every week and bought all the produce. And so I looked after that side of the business, and Marg tended to look after the other side.
Right. So you were pretty choosy about the biggest input was tomatoes, was it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So you're pretty choosy about where you got your tommies from.
Yeah. Maggie was always telling people how obsessed with tomatoes I was. Because, there are tomatoes and there's tomatoes. I would go down to the market. I would generally buy up the same growers or whatever. But, I was always pretty particular that there are different types of tomatoes and what I use different types for and all that sort of thing. So, I was always thinking about tomatoes.
Well, that
It
goes to your project. Your product was,
yes, well, that's right, because there was always cheap tomatoes if you wanted to find them. But the quality of them wasn't necessary. There's a reason why they're so cheap.
Yeah.
So, and
so you go.
No, so So I mean, there was all about quality and that sort of thing. So we worked really well as a team. It never become an issue. Now we're retired, it might be a different matter.
Well,
working wise, yeah.
I'm guessing you'll continue to grow tomatoes, perhaps, or you had enough. Yeah.
No. Well, no, I don't grow tomatoes.
So like underpinning this very successful business, you really did have a very loyal following. Secret recipes. Who developed those recipes for your preserves and sauces? Was there anything?
Well, no. I mean, I always remember as when I was younger, Dad used to make relish occasionally.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there was nothing special about them. We just we picked up recipes from here, there, and everywhere. When we first started, we used to make all weird and wonderful stuff. Like instead of making apricot jam, we'd make apricot and brandy jam, or and we learned over a short period of time. It didn't take us a long time to realise that most people want ordinary, everyday product. They don't need apricot and brandy jam. Yeah. They need apricot jam. So we sort of stuck to things that turned over and that people use. So there was nothing fancy about our preserves. We had plum jam, we had raspberry jam, we had tomato relish. We didn't make anything that was out of the ordinary, because we found that when we did try to do that sort of thing, it just sat on the shelf too long.
Right. So I'd say. What you're saying there is you knew your customers extremely well also.
Well, yes. I mean, you soon learn what would sell and what wouldn't, and then you would just discontinue a line that didn't work. And so I would say out of the 27 years, for the last 17 years, nothing much changed.
That's I think there's some magic in that, but it's also, I think, reflective of Queenscliff in some ways. As a newbie, it's historical and it's I
mean, we were there 20. Yeah, well, yes, it has gone backwards a little bit business wise, what it used to be. But I think there are several reasons for that. There used to be a lot more caravan parks. It was much busier in the summer. But having said that, it also is more evenly spread throughout the year now than what it used to be.
Yeah. So you had this. I would have thought your product could have transitioned well online. Was that ever something you thought about doing?
Well, we had an online presence. We had a website and we had an online order system, which it was never huge. We never really promoted it strongly. It was there if people wanted to use it, and we found over time that it was the same people that would mostly use it. But in our last 3 months of business, it certainly got a lot of use because Melbourne being in lockdown.
Yeah.
We just got inundated with orders from Melbourne, yeah.
This is what fascinated me about the article I saw, and really, I guess, this owner-to-owner podcast is about sharing stories of how owners transitioned out of their business. Maybe they exited, and I was fascinated that in some respects it's at the peak of your powers in terms of your business was incredibly busy at the time that you do you want to talk about how you chose to wind the business down rather than sell it? So do you want to talk about your decision to wind it down and what you went through in terms of considering other alternative exits like selling it?
Yes. Well, I think probably about halfway through our 27 years, so probably around at the 15, 16-year mark, we did actually go and talk to an agent and put it with an agent to sell. And we got a couple of nibbles, and then we sort of thought, well, hang on, if we sell this now, what are we going to do for the next 10 or 15 years? Do we go somewhere else and do exactly the same thing, or don't we? So we actually took it back off the market. We did that far out. We sort of decided that when we still had at least 15 years to go, that we would stick with the devil we know.
Right. So underpin, you must have also been happy still working in the business?
Oh, yes. Yeah. No, we were.
We
were still.
Like you were over it and got to sell tomorrow, which is often, what happens.
Yeah. Well, it is. But no, I mean, you have periods of time when it gets like that. But and 15, even at 15 years is a long time. But no, I think one of the reasons really deep down is why we stuck at it is I'm harping back to it, is because of what happened to us with the second business.
I hope you enjoyed the first part of my chat with Russell Spokes from Maggies Kitchen in Queenscliff, Victoria. The second and final part will play next week. We'll pick up where Russell starts to reflect on their long experience owning and running businesses before Maggies Kitchen, and how being clear on their personal priorities led them happily to their final decision on the best way for them to exit. So that is all for today's episode of Small Business Banter. I continue to be inspired, bringing you small business experts and other small business owners and hearing their stories. If you want to listen to any past episode, jump onto your podcast platform of choice and search Small Business Banter. There you will find a diverse and fascinating collection of small business owners and experts openly discussing and sharing their experiences. For any of the links, resources or information we've talked about on the show today, or to contact me, please head over to smallbusinessbanter.com, or you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. And it would be great to have you tune in the same time next week for another episode of Small Business Banter.